The day I overheard my own children plotting to take over my company was the day I decided to show the world what a 63-year-old woman could really do. I stood frozen in the hallway outside the conference room, my hand still on the doorknob, as their voices drifted through the crack in the door. "Mom's getting too old for this," my son Richard was saying, his voice carrying that patronizing tone he developed since getting his MBA. "The board agrees. We need fresh ideas, new technology. She's still running things like it's 1990. "I know," my daughter Emily sighed. "I love her, but she's becoming a liability. Investors are getting nervous. Did you see how her hands shook during the last presentation?" My hands had shaken that day because I'd been battling the flu, not because of my age. But that distinction apparently didn't matter to my children, the same children I had raised while building Hartwell Designs from nothing but a dream and a second mortgage on my modest home. "We need to approach this delicately," Richard continued. "Maybe suggest a consultant first, then transition her to chairman emeritus. Something that sounds important but keeps her out of operations." "She'll never go for it," Emily said. "You know how stubborn she is." I stepped away from the door, my heart pounding against my ribs. Stubborn? Was that what they called my persistence? The same persistence that had kept this company afloat during 3 recessions? The same stubborn determination that had paid for their private schools and Ivy League educations? I walked back to my office, closed the door quietly, and sat at my desk. The family photos stared back at me, Richard's graduation, Emily's wedding. I'd been so proud to bring them into the business, to create a legacy they could build on. Now they saw me as nothing but an old woman, a relic to be respectfully shelved. My computer screen displayed our latest quarterly report. Numbers didn't lie. While we were profitable, growth had stagnated. The furniture design industry was changing rapidly with online sales and direct-to-consumer models disrupting traditional retail channels. My children weren't wrong about that. But they were wrong about me. I opened my drawer and pulled out the business plan I'd been quietly developing for months. A digital transformation that would not only save Hartwell Designs, but catapult it into the future. I'd been hesitant to present it, concerned about the investment required and the risks involved, but now I realized I had nothing to lose. I picked up my phone and called the one person who had never underestimated me. "Marcus, it's Eleanor Hartwell. I think it's time we moved forward with Project Phoenix." Marcus Chen had been my technology advisor for years, a brilliant programmer 30 years, my junior, who had never once talked down to me or assumed I couldn't understand the technical details of his proposals. "Are you sure, Eleanor? The board was pretty resistant last time we floated the concept." "The board will follow the money, Marcus, and I'm about to show them exactly where it's going to come from." That night, I didn't confront my children about their betrayal. Instead, I stayed up until 3 in the morning, refining my plan, running projections, and preparing for battle. The next morning, I arrived at the office before anyone else, dressed in my sharpest suit, hair freshly styled, makeup perfect, armor for the corporate battlefield. I called an emergency board meeting for 10 o'clock. By 9:30, my assistant had arranged coffee and pastries in the conference room. By 9:45, board members were arriving, curiosity and concern written across their faces. Richard and Emily arrived last, exchanging worried glances when they saw the full board assembled. "Mom, what's this about?" Richard whispered as he took his seat. "We had that strategy meeting scheduled for next week." "I thought we should accelerate the timeline," I replied, my voice steady, "since everyone seems so concerned about the company's direction." The blood drained from his face. He knew I had heard them. I stood at the head of the table, surveying the faces around me. 6 board members, my 2 children, and Marcus, who sat quietly in the corner with his laptop ready. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," I began. "For 35 years, I've had the privilege of leading Hartwell Designs. We've weathered economic downturns, supply chain crises, and changing market trends. We've adapted and survived. But survival isn't enough anymore. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation. Today, I'm proposing a complete reinvention of Hartwell Designs. For the next hour, I outlined my vision. A digital platform that would revolutionize how furniture was designed, manufactured, and delivered. Custom pieces created through an intuitive online interface, produced through a network of local craftspeople, and delivered in weeks instead of months. Sustainable materials, transparent pricing, and a customer experience that blended old-world craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. I detailed the investment required, the risks involved, and most importantly, the projected returns. When I finished, the room was silent. Then Gerald Foster, our oldest board member at 72, began to slow clap. "Damn, Eleanor," he said with a grin. "Just when they think you're ready for the pasture, you show them you're still the thoroughbred in the race." The tension broke. Questions came rapidly, some skeptical, some enthusiastic. I answered each one with the confidence that comes from months of preparation. Marcus provided technical support, displaying prototypes of the platform on the conference room screen. Richard and Emily remained silent, their expressions shifting from shock to something more complex. Perhaps shame, perhaps admiration. I couldn't be sure. When the questions finally subsided, I made my closing argument. The board has a choice today. We can continue as we are and slowly fade into irrelevance, or we can take a calculated risk and potentially transform not just our company, but our entire industry. I paused, looking each board member in the eye. I'm prepared to stake my reputation and my legacy on this vision. The question is, are you brave enough to join me? The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive, 7-2 in favor of my plan. The dissenters were, predictably, the board members most closely aligned with my son. As the meeting adjourned, people filed out with a new energy, already discussing implementation details and next steps. Richard approached me last, Emily trailing behind him. "Mom, he began. I held up my hand. "Not now, Richard. We have work to do, both of you, my office, 5 o'clock. The confrontation with my children that evening was painful, but necessary. I didn't rage or accuse. I simply laid out what I had heard and how it had made me feel. You both assumed that my age made me incapable, I said, keeping my voice level despite the hurt. You plotted behind my back instead of coming to me with your concerns. We were worried about you, Emily protested. The stress, the long hours. If you were worried about my health, you would have suggested I take a vacation, not step down from the company I built. I countered. Be honest, at least with yourselves. You saw an opportunity to take control and you convinced yourselves it was for my benefit. Richard had the grace to look ashamed. We were wrong, Mom. Today's presentation proved that. But you have to admit, you've been resistant to technology and new marketing approaches. The plan I presented today has been in development for over a year. Did either of you ever ask me about my vision for the company's future? Did you assume I didn't have one? Their silence was answer enough. Project Phoenix moves forward, with Marcus leading technical implementation. Richard, you'll head market analysis and customer acquisition. Emily, you'll manage our artisan network and supply chain. You'll both report directly to me, and if you perform well, you'll have opportunities to grow with the company. And if we don't accept these roles? Richard asked, a hint of his old defiance returning. I met his gaze steadily. Then you're welcome to seek opportunities elsewhere. Family ties don't guarantee positions in my company. Results do. It was harsh, perhaps, but necessary. The next morning, both of my children were at work early, diving into their assignments with a new respect and perhaps a healthy fear of the mother they had underestimated. The following months were the most challenging and exhilarating of my career. We secured additional funding, hired a team of developers, and began building our platform. I worked 14-hour days, learned coding basics so I could communicate more effectively with our tech team, and personally recruited master craftspeople for our artisan network. There were setbacks, of course. Our first platform prototype crashed during a demonstration for potential investors. Supply chain issues delayed our launch by 6 weeks. A competitor announced a similar concept, sending our stock price temporarily downward. But we persevered. I drew on decades of industry relationships, calling in favors, negotiating deals, and opening doors that would have remained closed to less experienced executives. My age, which my children had seen as a liability, proved to be one of our greatest assets. The night before our platform's public launch, I sat alone in my office, reviewing our journey. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Everything's ready. You were right. This is going to change everything." I smiled, thinking of the Doubters Me children, certain board members, competitors who had dismissed us as an outdated company led by an outdated CEO. Tomorrow would be just the beginning of proving them wrong. The platform launch exceeded even our most optimistic projections. The press coverage was extensive, focusing on both the innovative technology and the story behind Ithao, a furniture industry matriarch, had pivoted her traditional company into the digital age. Orders flooded in, our artisan network expanded, and our stock price rose steadily. 3 months after launch, Richard came into my office with a printout of our latest financial report. "Mom, have you seen these numbers?" he asked, his expression a mix of disbelief and admiration. "I have," I replied, unable to keep the satisfaction from my voice. "What do you think?" "I think I was an idiot," he said, placing the report on my desk. "We've exceeded our 6-month projections in the first quarter. The customer satisfaction ratings are through the roof. And the sustainability press we're getting for our local manufacturing model." He shook his head. "I should have trusted your vision." "Yes, you should have," I agreed. "But to be fair, I hadn't shared the full scope of that vision with you or your sister. That was my mistake." "Why didn't you?" he asked, sitting down across from me. I considered the question carefully. Partly because I wasn't sure it would work, partly because I wanted to be certain of all the details before presenting it. And partly, I suppose, because I sensed you both were pulling away, seeing me as diminished somehow. Richard had the grace to look ashamed. "I'm sorry, Mom. Really, I let my ambition cloud my judgment." "Ambition isn't the problem, Richard. Ambition built this company. But ambition without respect for experience, for history, for the shoulders you're standing on, that's just arrogance." He nodded, accepting the rebuke. "So where do we go from here?" "Up," I said simply. "We're just getting started." And we were. By the end of our first year, Hartwell Designs had transformed from a respected but traditional furniture company into a technology-driven design platform that was disrupting the entire industry. Our market valuation had tripled. We'd expanded from North America into European markets, with Asia on the horizon. The board that had once been skeptical of my leadership was now unanimous in their support. Emily had grown into her role managing our artisan network, developing a certification program that became an industry standard for sustainable craftsmanship. Richard's marketing initiatives had attracted a younger demographic without alienating our traditional customer base. As for me, I found myself working harder than ever, but with a renewed sense of purpose. Each morning, I woke eager to face new challenges, to push boundaries, to prove that innovation wasn't the exclusive territory of the young. On the anniversary of our platform launch, we held a celebration at our headquarters. Employees, board members, key artisans, and investors gathered to mark the occasion. I stood at the podium, surveying the crowd that had helped make my vision a reality. A year ago, I began. Many people thought Hartwell Designs was at the end of its story, a traditional company in a changing market, led by a CEO who perhaps should have gracefully retired. Laughter rippled through the audience. Some of those people were sitting in our boardroom, I continued. Some were competitors who dismissed us. Some were even members of my own family. I glanced at Richard and Emily, who smiled ruefully. Experience isn't a liability, it's a foundation. Innovation doesn't belong exclusively to the young. And sometimes, the person you underestimate is exactly the one who will revolutionize everything. The applause was thunderous. As I stepped away from the podium, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass wall of the conference room. I saw not an aging woman clinging to relevance, but a visionary leader in her prime. The lines on my face weren't marks of decline. They were evidence of a life fully lived, of challenges overcome, of wisdom hard won. The company that my children thought I was too old to run was now on track to become an industry giant, and I was just getting warmed up. That night, as I drove home, my phone rang through the car's speaker system. It was Gerald Foster, the board member who had been my earliest supporter. Eleanor, he said, his voice carrying a note of excitement, I just got off the phone with representatives from Meridian Global. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Meridian Global was one of the largest investment firms in the world, known for backing companies on the verge of exponential growth. What did they want? I asked, though I could guess. They're interested in leading our next funding round. They're talking serious money, Eleanor. The kind that could turn Hartwell into a billion-dollar company within 2 years. I smiled as I turned into my driveway, thinking of the journey ahead, of the empire I was building, of the legacy that would outlast all the doubts and dismissals. Tell them I'm available for lunch next week, I said. And Gerald, tell them to bring their checkbook, we're just getting started. The Meridian Global meeting changed everything. I arrived at the Metropolitan Club 15 minutes early, as was my habit. Power moves weren't just for men in their 40s wearing Italian suits. At 63, in my charcoal St. John knit dress and grandmother's pearls, I had my own arsenal. Ms. Hartwell, what a pleasure, said James Donovan, Meridian's managing partner, rising as I approached the table. His smile was practiced, his handshake firm but not aggressive. I've been following your company's transformation with great interest. Have you really, James? I set my portfolio on the table. Or did your analysts flag us as an unexpected growth opportunity last quarter? His smile faltered just enough to confirm my suspicion. A bit of both, if I'm being honest, but I've personally been a fan since you launched the Artisan Network. My wife ordered a custom dining set. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. I nodded, accepting this olive branch of authenticity. Thank you. Our artisans take great pride in their work. The waiter approached, and James ordered a 25-year-old Macallan. I asked for sparkling water with lime. His eyebrows rose slightly. Not a drinker? He asked. Not during negotiations, I replied. I find clarity serves me better than false courage. James laughed, a genuine sound that softened his corporate veneer. I've heard you're direct. I appreciate that. Then you'll appreciate this. Why is Meridian interested in Hartwell Designs now, when your firm declined to meet with us during our initial funding round? He didn't flinch. Because we were wrong. We saw a traditional furniture company attempting a digital transformation and calculated the risk as too high. We didn't factor in your leadership. My old leadership, I corrected. The same leadership your associates deemed resistant to innovation in their industry analysis last year. James had the grace to look embarrassed. You read that report? I make it a point to know what people say about me, especially when they think I'm not listening. I opened my portfolio and slid a document across the table. These are my terms for Meridian's participation in our next funding round. He glanced at the paper, his eyes widening slightly at the valuation. This is ambitious. It's accurate, I countered, based on our current growth trajectory and expansion plans for Asian markets. Speaking of expansion, James said, recovering quickly, our team has some concerns about your capacity to scale at the rate you're projecting. The artisan model works beautifully, but can it meet increasing demand? Turn to page 3, I instructed. You'll find our artisan recruitment and training program. We're not just finding existing craftspeople, we're creating new ones. Apprenticeship programs in 12 cities, with plans for 20 more by year's end. The lunch continued, a careful dance of questions and answers, challenges and solutions. By dessert, James was no longer the confident financier with doubts about an aging CEO's vision. He was a convert, eager to join what was clearly becoming a revolutionary business model. But Eleanor, I should warn you, they'll want a succession plan. I'd been expecting this. You mean they'll want assurance that when the old lady retires, the company won't collapse? He winced. That's not how I would phrase it. But that's what they're thinking, I said. Tell your committee that my succession plan is to build a company so strong, so innovative, and so essential that it would thrive regardless of who sits in the CEO chair, including me. That's not the kind of specific plan they typically... It's the only plan they're getting, James. Hartwell Designs isn't a traditional company anymore, and we don't operate by traditional rules. If that's a problem for Meridian, there are 6 other firms waiting for my call. His expression told me what I needed to know. Meridian wouldn't walk away. 2 weeks later, we announced a $100 million funding round led by Meridian Global. Our valuation soared past $500 million, and suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of the company they had once dismissed as outdated. The influx of capital accelerated our growth, but also brought new challenges. Our tech team worked around the clock to scale our platform. Our artisan network expanded so rapidly that Emily struggled to maintain quality control. Richard's marketing department doubled, then tripled in size. And me? I found myself becoming the face of a movement I hadn't anticipated, a symbol for women of a certain age refusing to be sidelined. Interview requests poured in. The Furniture Queen's Digital Revolution, read one headline. 60, something and disrupting an industry, proclaimed another. I accepted select media appearances, using each one to reinforce our brand message while subtly challenging perceptions about age and innovation. But the spotlight brought scrutiny as well as acclaim. It was after a particularly grueling day of back-to-back interviews that I received the call from Marcus. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Eleanor, we have a problem. Someone's attacking our platform. I straightened in my chair. What kind of attack? A sophisticated one. They're probing for weaknesses, testing our security protocols. They haven't breached anything critical yet, but they're persistent. Can you trace it? We're trying, but they're good at covering their tracks. This isn't some random hacker. This is targeted and professional. I felt a chill. Success always bred enemies, but this felt personal. Increase security. Bring in outside experts if needed, whatever it costs. Already on it, Marcus assured me. But Eleanor, I think we should consider who might have both the resources and motivation to do this. The implication hung in the air. A competitor, perhaps even one of the established furniture giants that had been losing market share to our disruptive model. Make a list, I said. And Marcus, keep this between us for now. No need to alarm the team or the board until we know more. After hanging up, I sat in my darkened office, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled. We'd moved so quickly, achieved so much, that I'd almost forgotten the fundamental rule of business. Success makes you a target. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with my executive team. Richard, Emily, Marcus, and our newly hired Chief Operating Officer, Diane Winters, gathered in my office. We have a situation, I began, nodding to Marcus to explain the technical details of the attack. When he finished, Richard was the first to speak. Could this be Westmore Furniture? Their CEO practically threatened us at the industry conference last month. Or Concept Living, Emily suggested. They've been trying to copy our platform for months without success. It could be either, both, or someone we haven't considered, I said. But the method matters more than the source right now. Marcus, what are our vulnerabilities? Marcus ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. Our customer data is secure. The platform architecture is holding. But they're persistent, probing different entry points. If they find a weakness, they won't, I said with more confidence than I felt. Because we're going to strengthen every aspect of our security while simultaneously preparing for the worst-case scenario. Which is, Diane asked, her expression grave. A breach that compromises customer information, disrupts our platform, or damages our artisan network. I looked at each of them in turn. I want contingency plans for all three scenarios on my desk by tomorrow morning. As they filed out, I asked Emily to stay behind. How are you holding up? I asked my daughter once we were alone. The past year had transformed our relationship. The initial tension after I'd overheard her betrayal had gradually given way to a new professional respect, though personal warmth was still rebuilding slowly. Emily sighed, dropping her professional facade. Honestly, I'm overwhelmed. The artisan network has grown from 30 craftspeople to over 300 in 18 months. Quality control is becoming impossible to manage personally. Then don't try to, I said simply. You need a new structure, regional managers, standardized training, digital quality tracking. I know, but finding the right people takes time, and meanwhile, orders keep pouring in. She hesitated. Mom, I owe you an apology. I raised an eyebrow. Another one? She smiled ruefully. Yes, I never understood the pressure you were under all those years. Running this company, raising us, dealing with competitors and market shifts. I thought I knew what leadership meant, but I had no idea. The admission touched me. Leadership is lonely, I acknowledged. That's why I wanted you and Richard involved. Not to push me out, but to stand beside me. I understand that now. Emily reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. And I'm here, really here this time. The moment of connection was brief but significant. As Emily left to tackle her expanding responsibilities, I felt a weight lift. My daughter was finally becoming the partner I'd always hoped she would be. Richard proved harder to read. While he executed his marketing responsibilities brilliantly, he maintained an emotional distance that concerned me. The ambition that had once led him to plot my removal still burned bright, but now it seemed directed outward, toward our competitors, rather than inward at me. Or so I thought, until Diane knocked on my door late one evening with information that shook my newfound confidence in my son. Eleanor, I need to show you something, she said, placing a tablet on my desk. Our security team flagged this email exchange. I scrolled through the messages, my stomach tightening with each line. Richard had been in communication with James Donovan at Meridian Global, discussing company strategies and challenges that hadn't been shared with our investors. This isn't necessarily nefarious, Diane cautioned, but the timing, given the security attacks. After she left, I sat staring at the evidence of what might be another betrayal by my son. The messages weren't explicitly disloyal, but they revealed information about our expansion plans and technical challenges that should have remained confidential. I called Richard into my office first thing the next morning. Explain these, I said, sliding the tablet across my desk. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition to defensiveness. You're monitoring my emails? I'm protecting this company, I corrected. Why are you discussing internal matters with Meridian without authorization? Richard leaned back, his posture deliberately casual. James and I have a professional relationship. He's interested in our growth strategy. He's an investor, not a confidant. These messages reveal proprietary information about our Asian expansion plans. Information that Meridian is entitled to as our major investor, Richard countered. In quarterly reports and board meetings, not in private emails with the marketing director. I studied my son's face, searching for the truth behind his defiance. Richard, are you angling for something with Meridian? A separate role? Their support for your position within Hartwell? A flash of guilt crossed his features before he masked it. That's absurd. Is it? Because from where I sit, it looks like you're either being manipulated by Donovan or actively undermining my leadership. Richard stood abruptly. I'm trying to secure our future. Meridian wants assurance that this company has longevity beyond your tenure. They're concerned about succession. And you took it upon yourself to address those concerns without consulting me. Because you refused to discuss succession at all. His composure finally cracked. Mom, you're 63. You've achieved something remarkable, but you won't be running this company forever. Someone needs to think about what comes next. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they contained a kernel of truth I'd been avoiding. I had been deliberately vague about succession because I wasn't ready to let go, not when I was finally proving what I was capable of. You're right, I said quietly, surprising him. We do need a succession plan, but undermining my authority with investors isn't the way to position yourself as my successor, Richard. His expression softened. I wasn't trying to undermine you. Perhaps not intentionally, but these communications stop now. All investor relations go through proper channels. Understood? He nodded, chastened, but not defeated. As he turned to leave, I added, and Richard, if you want to be CEO someday, start acting like one. Leaders protect their companies. They don't expose vulnerabilities to outsiders, even friendly ones. The conversation left me unsettled. Richard's ambition wasn't inherently problematic. I'd raised him to be driven, but his methods revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of leadership that concerned me deeply. That concern was amplified the following week when Marcus confirmed our worst fears. The security probes had escalated to a full-scale attack, and they had managed to access non-critical systems. They haven't reached customer data or the platform core, he assured me during an emergency meeting, but they're in our network, exploring. Can you tell who's behind it? I asked. Marcus hesitated. We've traced the attacks to servers associated with Concept Living. The room fell silent. Concept Living was our most aggressive competitor, a company that had been trying to replicate our business model without success. We need to go public with this, Richard argued. Expose them before they can do real damage. Without definitive proof, Diane countered. That's asking for a lawsuit. I agree with Diane, I said. We strengthen our defenses, document everything, and prepare for any scenario, but we don't accuse without ironclad evidence. The meeting continued, strategies proposed and refined until we had a comprehensive response plan. As the team dispersed, Emily lingered. 3 of our master artisans received job offers from Concept Living last week, significantly higher pay, equity packages. I frowned. Did they accept? No, they came to me instead. They're loyal to what we've built. She paused. But it can't be coincidence, the cyber attacks and now this. No, it can't. I felt a cold anger building. They're attacking us from every angle. Technology, talent, probably trying to access our customer data too. What do we do? I considered our options. We protect what's ours. Increase security, yes, but also strengthen our community. Our artisans stayed loyal because they feel part of something meaningful. That's our advantage. Recognition programs, profit sharing for master craftspeople. Good. And Emily? Thank you for bringing this to me directly. After she left, I sat alone, contemplating the escalating threats to the company I'd rebuilt. Concept Living's multi-pronged attack, Richard's concerning communications with Meridian, the succession question that wouldn't remain unanswered forever. I opened my desk drawer and removed a small leather journal me mother's, given to me when I started the company. Inside, her handwriting still clear after all these years. Remember, Eleanor, business isn't just about products or profits. It's about people and principles. When in doubt, return to your foundation. My foundation, the craftsmanship and quality that had built Hartwell Designs originally, the innovation and technology that had transformed it. The people, artisans, employees, customers who believed in our vision. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I rarely used. Gerald? It's Eleanor. I need your advice, old friend. Things are getting complicated, and I could use a perspective I trust. As I explained the situation, I gazed out my office window at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, competitors were plotting our downfall. Investors were questioning our future. My own son was positioning himself for power. But I hadn't come this far to surrender now. The empire I was building would withstand these challenges not because of money or technology, but because its foundation was stronger than anyone realized. When I hung up with Gerald, I had clarity. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but tonight, I knew exactly what needed to be done. The company they thought I was too old to run was about to demonstrate just how formidable experience could be when combined with determination. I opened my laptop and began to type an email to the entire company. Subject, standing strong. Team, we face unprecedented challenges from those who underestimate us. They mistake our innovative spirit for vulnerability. They're about to learn how wrong they are. The response to my company-wide email was immediate and overwhelming. Employees from every department rallied, offering extended hours and innovative solutions. Our artisans, many of whom had decades of experience themselves, reached out with messages of solidarity. By morning, Hartwell Designs felt less like a corporation under siege and more like a community preparing to defend its home. I arrived at the office before dawn, reviewing our security team's overnight reports. The attacks had continued but met strengthened defenses. Marcus had assembled a remarkable team of cybersecurity experts who worked in shifts, monitoring our systems around the clock. "Good morning, Eleanor," Diane said, appearing in my doorway with 2 coffee cups. She handed me one and took a seat across from my desk. "I've been thinking about our concept living problem." I sipped the coffee, strong, black, exactly how I needed it after a night of minimal sleep. "Go on. What if we're looking at this all wrong? What if the cyber attacks aren't just about stealing our data or disrupting our platform? What else would they be after?" Diane leaned forward. "Information about our funding round with Meridian, details of our Asian expansion, intelligence they could use to undermine investor confidence." It wasn't a question, but Diane nodded anyway. "I've been reviewing the timing. The attacks intensified right after we announced the Meridian funding. And they're particularly focused on systems that might contain financial projections and expansion plans. Systems that Richard would have access to," I said quietly. Diane's expression remained carefully neutral. "I'm not accusing your son of anything, Eleanor, but the coincidence is concerning." "Investigate it," I instructed. "Discreetly. If Richard is being manipulated or compromised, I need to know." After she left, I sat with the unsettling possibility that my son might be even unwittingly involved in the attacks against our company. The thought made my stomach clench, but I couldn't afford to let personal feelings cloud my judgment, not with so much at stake. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Mom, we need to talk, privately. Can you meet me at Riverside Park in an hour?" The unusual request raised immediate concerns. I texted back my agreement and rescheduled my morning meetings. An hour later, I found Emily sitting on a bench overlooking the Hudson River, her expression troubled. She stood when she saw me approaching. "Thank you for coming," she said, hugging me briefly before we both sat down. "What's going on?" I asked. "Why the secrecy?" Emily took a deep breath. "I found something on Richard's computer. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I needed marketing data for the artisan showcase, and his assistant said I could use his system while he was in meetings." My pulse quickened. "What did you find?" "Emails between Richard and Victor Sloan." The name hit me like a physical blow. Victor Sloan, CEO of Concept Living, our most aggressive competitor, the company we suspected was behind the cyber attacks. "Show me," I said, my voice tight. Emily handed me her phone with screenshots of the emails. I scrolled through them, each message confirming my worst fears. Richard had been sharing information not comprehensive enough to be called corporate espionage, but certainly inappropriate. Details about our technology challenges, hints about our expansion timeline, complaints about my leadership style. Look at the most recent exchange. I scrolled to the final emails. Victor suggesting a meeting. Richard agreeing. The proposed date, tomorrow. "Have you confronted him?" I asked, handing back the phone. Emily shook her head. "I wanted to talk to you first. Mom, I don't think he realizes what he's doing. He's always been competitive with you, always needed to prove himself. I think Sloan is playing on that insecurity." "That doesn't excuse betraying the company," I said, more sharply than I intended. "No, it doesn't," Emily agreed. "But it might explain it, and maybe give us a way to handle this without destroying the company or our family." I stood, needing to move, to think. The revelation of Richard's communications with our chief competitor felt like a physical pain, a wound reopening just when I thought our family rifts were healing. "We need to know what he's planning to discuss with Sloan," I said finally. "And we need to confront him before that meeting happens." "Tonight," Emily suggested, "at your house, neutral territory, away from the office." I nodded, already formulating a strategy. "In the meantime, we say nothing to anyone else, not even Marcus or Diane." "Agreed." Emily stood, looking relieved to have shared her discovery, but still troubled. "Mom, what if he doesn't see what he's done wrong?" The question cut to the heart of my fears. Then we'll have to make decisions I'd rather not make. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. Back at the office, I found it nearly impossible to focus on routine matters. My son, my own child, had been communicating with the CEO, actively trying to destroy our company. Whether from ambition, resentment, or simple naivety, the betrayal stung in a way that transcended business concerns. At 5 o'clock, I texted both my children. "Dinner at my house. 7 p.m. Important family discussion." Richard replied immediately. "Can we reschedule? I have plans." "Cancel them," I wrote back. "This isn't optional." By 6:30, I had prepared a simple meal comfort food from their childhood. Pot roast and roasted vegetable sand set the dining room table with the good china. Not as a celebration, but as a statement. This was still a family, despite everything. Emily arrived first, looking nervous but resolved. Richard came 20 minutes late, his expression guarded when he saw both of us waiting. "What's this about?" he asked, remaining standing while Emily and I sat at the table. "Sit down, Richard," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil I felt. "We need to talk about Victor Sloan." The color drained from his face. His eyes darted to Emily, who met his gaze without flinching. "You went through my emails," he accused her. "I found them accidentally," she corrected. "But that's hardly the point, is it? You've been communicating with the CEO of a company that's actively attacking us." Richard sank into a chair. his defiance giving way to something more complex, shame, perhaps, or calculation. It was hard to tell with my son these days. "It's not what you think," he began. "Then explain it," I said. "Because from where I sit, it looks like betrayal." "Sloan reached out to me," Richard said. "After the funding announcement, he said he admired what we were building and wanted to discuss potential collaboration." "Collaboration," I repeated skeptically. "With the company launching cyber attacks against us and trying to poach our artisans?" Richard's expression registered surprise. "What are you talking about? What cyber attacks?" Either he was an exceptional actor, or he genuinely didn't know. Concept Living has been systematically attacking our systems for weeks. They've also approached our master artisans with lucrative job offers. "I didn't know," Richard insisted. "Sloan never mentioned any of that. He talked about partnership opportunities, market expansion, combining our platform with their manufacturing capabilities." "And you believed him?" Emily asked incredulously. "Why wouldn't I? It made strategic sense. Their production capacity, our technology and artisan network." He trailed off, seeing our expressions. "I was trying to explore options that would strengthen our position." "By going behind my back," I said. "By sharing internal information with our most aggressive competitor." "I didn't share anything proprietary," Richard protested. "Just general challenges we were facing, things any industry insider would know." I pushed the printouts of his emails across the table. "Read these again and tell me they don't reveal more than general challenges." He scanned the pages, his confidence visibly faltering as he saw his own words through our eyes. I didn't mean to." "What did you think would happen at this meeting tomorrow?" I asked. "What were you planning to discuss?" Richard looked trapped. He wanted to talk about a potential merger, Concept Living acquiring Hartwell Designs. The revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Emily gasped softly. "A merger," I repeated, "where you would become CEO of the combined entity," Richard admitted quietly. "Sloan would move to chairman." "And what would happen to me in this arrangement?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Richard couldn't meet my eyes. "Emeritus status, advisory role, full financial recognition of your contribution." "The same plan you and Emily discussed over a year ago," I noted, "just with a different mechanism." "Mom, I held up my hand, stopping his explanation. "The meeting tomorrow. You're going." Both my children looked startled. "You want him to meet with Sloan?" Emily asked incredulously. "Yes, but not alone." I looked directly at Richard. "We're all going. You'll contact Sloan and tell him you want to bring your sister and me to discuss this potential merger. If he balks, you'll say it's the only way forward." Understanding dawned on Richard's face. "You want to confront him about the attacks." "I want to hear what he has to say when faced with all of us. I want to see his reaction when we present evidence of his company's actions against ours. And I want you, Richard, to witness firsthand the man you were willing to trust with the company your mother built." Richard nodded slowly, the full weight of his actions finally seeming to register. "And if he refuses to meet with all of us?" "Then that tells us everything we need to know about his intentions," I said simply. The next morning, we gathered in my office. Richard had confirmed that Sloan had agreed somewhat reluctantly to meet with all three of us. Marcus joined us to review the evidence of the cyber attacks, presenting a comprehensive timeline and technical details that would be difficult to dispute. "Remember," I instructed as we prepared to leave, "we're not accusing until we have his reaction. We're exploring a potential business arrangement that requires complete transparency from both sides." The meeting was set for noon at a private dining room in the Grand, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. As our car pulled up to the entrance, I felt a curious calm descend. After decades in business, I'd faced countless confrontations, but none had felt quite so personal or so consequential. Victor Sloan rose as we entered the room, his practiced smile faltering slightly when he saw all three of us. In his mid-50s, he projected the polished confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. "Eleanor," he said, extending his hand. "This is an unexpected pleasure. I was under the impression our companies were fierce competitors." The initial pleasantries were strained but civil. We ordered lunch, exchanged obligatory comments about market conditions, and gradually steered the conversation toward the proposed merger. "Richard tells me you're interested in acquiring Hartwell Designs," I said as our main courses arrived. "I'm curious about your vision for such a combination." Sloan smiled smoothly. "Integration of your platform technology with our manufacturing scale. Expansion of the artisan concept internationally. A truly revolutionary approach to furniture design and production." "And the leadership structure?" I prompted. "As I discussed with Richard, I would step into a chairman role, with Richard as CEO. You would be recognized as founder emeritus, with appropriate financial compensation for the company you've built." "Appropriate compensation," I repeated. "And what would that look like, in your estimation?" Sloan named a figure that, a year ago, might have seemed impressive. Now, with our growth trajectory, it was almost insulting. "That's significantly below our current valuation," Emily pointed out. Sloane's smile tightened. "Valuations are speculative. We're offering certainty." "Certainty is valuable," I agreed, "as is transparency. So in the spirit of transparency, I'd like to discuss some concerns we have." I nodded to Richard, who opened his laptop and turned it toward Sloan. On the screen was the evidence Marcus had compiled of the cyber attacks, complete with IP addresses traced to Concept Living servers. "Can you explain these?" Richard asked, his voice steady despite the tension evident in his posture. Sloane's expression shifted from confusion to careful neutrality. "I'm not a technical person. I don't know what I'm looking at." "You're looking at evidence of systematic cyber attacks against Hartwell Designs," I said. "Attacks originating from your company's servers." "That's a serious accusation," Sloan said, his tone hardening. "And completely unfounded. If there have been security incidents, they're nothing to do with Concept Living." Emily slid forward a folder. "These are records of your company approaching our master artisans with job offers significantly above market rate, all within the past 3 weeks." Sloane's facade began to crack. "Talent recruitment isn't corporate espionage, Miss Hartwell. It's business." "It is," I agreed. "Just as business meetings are business, like the one you had with James Donovan at Meridian Global last week." This visibly startled him. "How did you know that you met with our primary investor? The same investor who's been pressing for details about our succession plan?" I leaned forward. "You've been busy, Victor. Attacking our systems, poaching our talent, meeting with our investors, and grooming my son as your inside man." "That's absurd," Sloan sputtered, but his composure was crumbling. "Richard approached me about strategic opportunities." "After you initiated contact," Richard corrected, finally seeing the manipulation for what it was. "After you suggested that my mother's leadership was limiting the company's potential." "I merely observed that companies need to evolve," Sloan said defensively. "That sometimes the founders who build businesses aren't the right people to scale them. And you thought you'd help that evolution along," I said. "With cyber attacks designed to undermine our platform, with targeted recruitment to weaken our artisan network, with whispers to our investors about succession concerns." Sloane's expression hardened. "You can't prove any connection between Concept Living and these alleged attacks." "Actually, we can," I said calmly. "Our security team has compiled comprehensive evidence we're prepared to share with law enforcement and the SEC if necessary." "You're bluffing," Sloan said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Try me," I challenged. "Or we can discuss a different kind of arrangement." "What arrangement?" Sloan asked warily. One where you immediately cease all attacks on our systems, where you stop approaching our artisans, where you acknowledge to Meridian Global that your merger overtures were rejected because of ethical concerns about your business practices. And why would I agree to any of that? Because the alternative is worse, Richard interjected, finding his voice. We go public with everything we know. We file complaints with every relevant regulatory body. We make sure that every potential investor, partner, or customer knows exactly how Concept Living conducts business. Sloan looked from Richard to Emily to me, calculating his options. And if I agree to your terms? We keep this conversation private, I said. We continue as competitors, but ethical ones. But I admit nothing. That's acceptable, I said, rising from my chair. But understand this, Victor. If we detect any further attacks or interference, we won't have another conversation. We'll go straight to enforcement. As we left the restaurant, a weight seemed to lift from Richard's shoulders. Mom, I'm sorry. I had no idea what he was really doing. I thought... You thought he recognized your potential. I finished for him. And he did. He recognized your ambition and your frustration, and used both against you and against this company. I was an idiot, Richard admitted. You were manipulated, Emily corrected, showing unexpected compassion for her brother. It happens to the best of us. Back at the office, we gathered with Marcus and Diane to debrief them on the confrontation. Marcus reported that the attacks had already diminished, suggesting Sloan was honoring our agreement, at least for now. So what happens next? Diane asked, looking from me to my children. We get back to building this company, I said firmly. We strengthen our security, support our artisan network, and continue our expansion plans. And we address the succession question, Richard added quietly. Properly this time, as a family and as a leadership team. I studied my son, seeing genuine remorse in his expression. The confrontation with Sloan had been revelatory for him, showing him the difference between ambition and leadership, between wanting power and deserving it. Yes, I agreed. We will, but first, we need to ensure that what we're passing on is worth inheriting. As the meeting concluded, I felt a curious mix of emotions: relief that the immediate threat had been addressed, disappointment in Richard's susceptibility to manipulation, pride in Emily's loyalty, and a renewed determination to secure Hartwell's future. The empire I was building had withstood its first major attack. We'd emerged stronger, wiser, and more united. But I harbored no illusions that Victor Sloan would simply retreat. Men like him rarely accepted defeat gracefully. That evening, as I worked late in my office, I received an unexpected call from James Donovan at Meridian Global. Eleanor, he said without preamble, I just had the most interesting conversation with Victor Sloan. Did you? I kept my tone neutral. He seemed to think I might be interested in backing away from Hartwell Designs due to leadership concerns. I assured him that Meridian has complete confidence in your leadership. Thank you, James. Don't thank me yet, he said. Because while I meant what I said about our confidence in you, the board is still asking about succession planning. Today's events only underscore the importance of having clarity on that front. I sighed, recognizing that this was one battle I couldn't indefinitely postpone. You'll have it, James, within 30 days. A comprehensive succession plan that ensures Hartwell's continued growth and innovation. After hanging up, I gazed out at the city skyline, lights twinkling against the darkening sky. The confrontation with Sloan had been necessary but incomplete. The real challenge lay ahead, defining the future of Hartwell Designs beyond my leadership while ensuring that future honored what I'd built. And perhaps more difficult still, deciding whether Richard, despite his serious lapse in judgment, could ever be trusted to lead the company I'd sacrificed so much to create. The promised 30 days to deliver a succession plan to Meridian Global stretched before me like a gauntlet. Each morning, I woke with the weight of the decision pressing on my mind. Each night, I reviewed the day's events, searching for clarity about the future of Hartwell Design and my children's roles in it. Richard had retreated into a focused humility that was unlike him. He arrived early, stayed late, and approached every task with a quiet determination to prove himself trustworthy again. No grand gestures or impassioned speeches, just consistent, diligent work and a newfound willingness to listen rather than dominate conversations. Emily had stepped more confidently into her leadership role, expanding the artisan network with innovative training programs and quality control systems. She'd developed a presence that commanded respect without demanding a leadership style that reminded me, sometimes startlingly, of my own. 2 weeks after our confrontation with Sloane, I invited Gerald Foster to dinner at my home. At 72, my oldest board member remained sharp as ever, with a wisdom I valued now more than ever. "You're overthinking this, Eleanor," he said as we settled in my living room with glasses of scotch. "The succession plan doesn't need to be complicated. It does when your son has demonstrated questionable judgment and your daughter, while capable, lacks experience in overall company strategy," I countered. Gerald chuckled. "You're describing every family business in history. The question isn't whether they're perfect leaders, it's whether they can become the leaders the company needs. And if neither of them can? Then you look outside the family," he shrugged. "But I don't think that's necessary. Richard made a mistake, a serious one, granted, but he's shown genuine remorse and understanding. Emily has grown tremendously in the past year. Together, with the right structure, they could be formidable." "Together," I repeated, considering the idea. "A co-leadership model. It's not traditional, but neither is Hartwell Designs anymore." Gerald sipped his scotch. "Richard's marketing vision, combined with Emily's commitment to craftsmanship and quality. Your son's ambition tempered by your daughter's steadiness, it could work." The concept resonated, addressing both my concerns about Richard's judgment and Emily's limited strategic experience. But questions remained about implementation, timing, and my own role in the transition. "And where do I fit in this structure?" I asked. "That, my friend, is entirely up to you." Gerald's expression softened. "You've proven your point, Eleanor. No one questions your capability or vision anymore. The question now is what you want for yourself, not just for the company." His words stayed with me long after he left. What did I want? The vindication of my leadership had been sweet, but was it enough? Did I want to remain at the helm indefinitely, or was there a next chapter waiting to be written? The following day, I called Marcus into my office. Over the years, he had become more than our technology leader. He was a trusted advisor whose perspective I valued. "I need your honest assessment," I said after outlining the co-leadership concept. "Could Richard and Emily effectively lead this company together?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "From a structural perspective, yes, their skills are complementary. The concern would be interpersonal dynamics and decision-making processes." "Meaning?" "They'd need clear domains of authority and a defined process for resolving disagreements." He paused. "And they'd need you, at least initially, as a guide and referee." "As executive chairwoman," I suggested, "stepping back from day-to-day operations but available for strategic guidance and conflict resolution." Marcus nodded. "That could work. A phased transition that gives them increasing authority while maintaining your oversight." The plan was taking shape in my mind, a 3-year transition with clearly defined phases, responsibilities gradually shifting from me to my children, with safeguards to protect the company if either of them proved unequal to their role. But before I could formalize anything, we faced an unexpected crisis that would test all of us. It began with a call from Diane, her voice uncharacteristically tense. "Eleanor, you need to see this. Bloomberg just published an exposé on furniture industry labor practices." Concept living is featured prominently and not in a good way. Within an hour, the story was everywhere. Investigative journalists had uncovered evidence that Concept Living's manufacturing facilities in Southeast Asia employed child labor, maintained unsafe working conditions, and systematically falsified compliance reports to major retailers. Victor Sloan issued an immediate denial, but photographs, internal documents, and whistleblower testimonies painted a damning picture. Concept Living's stock plummeted. Retailers began pulling their products from shelves. The Department of Justice announced a preliminary investigation. "This explains Sloan's desperate moves against us," Emily said during an emergency executive meeting. "He knew this was coming and needed a way to shore up his business. By acquiring our ethical manufacturing model and artisan network," Richard added, "he could have used us to rehabilitate his image while continuing his practices behind the scenes." I studied my children, impressed by their insight. The question is, how do we respond? This is a competitor in crisis. We could simply watch from the sidelines. Or we could take a stand, Emily suggested. Reinforce our commitment to ethical craftsmanship and fair labor practices. More than that, Richard said, surprising me with what came next. We could offer a lifeline to the workers affected by this scandal. Expand our artisan training programs to Southeast Asia. Create opportunities for skilled craftspeople being harmed by Concept Living's practices. The suggestion showed a maturity and ethical awareness I hadn't expected from my ambitious son. That would be a significant investment with uncertain returns, I noted, testing his commitment. It would be the right thing to do, Richard responded simply, and strategically sound for our brand and global expansion. Emily was nodding. "We've been looking for the right approach to Asian markets. This could be eye-tentering, not as exploiters, but as partners and educators." Their unified vision, centered on both ethical principles and sound business strategy, confirmed what I had been considering. Perhaps they were ready for greater leadership responsibility after all. "Develop a proposal," I instructed them. "Together. I want to see a comprehensive plan within 48 hours. As they left to begin work, Diane remained behind. "You're testing them," she observed. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of activity. Richard and Emily worked around the clock, consulting with our legal team, financial advisors, and artisan network leaders. They emerged from Richard's office, looking exhausted but aligned, presenting a proposal that exceeded my expectations in both its ethical framework and business acumen. "We propose establishing the Hartwell Craftsmanship Academy in 3 locations across Southeast Asia," Richard explained, outlining a program that would provide training, fair wages, and potential integration into our global artisan network. "The initial investment is substantial," Emily acknowledged, "but we've identified grant opportunities and potential partners who share our commitment to sustainable, ethical manufacturing. And the PR value is significant," Richard added. "We position Hartwell Designs not just as a furniture company, but as an industry leader in ethical practices and craftsmanship preservation." Their presentation continued, addressing potential risks, implementation timelines, and expected outcomes. They had thought of everything, challenged each other's assumptions, and emerged with a stronger plan than either could have created alone. When they finished, I allowed myself a small smile. "Implement it," I said simply. "Full authority, full responsibility. This is your project to lead." The surprise on their faces was evident. "Both of us?" Richard asked. "As co-leaders," I confirmed. "Consider it a test run for a more permanent arrangement we'll be discussing soon." As they left my office, visibly energized by the challenge and the trust I'd placed in them, I turned to the succession plan I'd been drafting. The pieces were falling into place, but one major question remained. How would the board and, specifically, Meridian Global respond to a co-CEO model led by siblings with a complicated history? I didn't have to wait long to find out. James Donovan requested a meeting the following week, ostensibly to discuss the Southeast Asia initiative, but clearly with succession on his agenda as well. It's an impressive response to the concept living scandal, he acknowledged as we sat in my office. Bold but measured, ethical but strategic. Your children surprised me with this one. They surprised me too, I admitted. They're growing into the leaders this company needs. Both of them? James raised an eyebrow. Even after Richard's indiscretion with Sloane. People learn more from their mistakes than their successes, James. Richard made a serious error in judgment, but his response since then has shown character and growth. James nodded thoughtfully. And the succession plan? Our 30 days are almost up. I slid a folder across the desk. As promised, a 3-year transition to co-CEO leadership by Richard and Emily, with me remaining as executive chairwoman during and after the transition. He scanned the document, his expression revealing nothing. Co-CEOs. That's unusual. So is Hartwell Designs. I countered. Our business model combines technology, craftsmanship, and human connection in ways our industry has never seen before. Our leadership structure should be equally innovative. And if they disagree, if the sibling dynamic becomes problematic, then I retain authority to intervene, and if necessary, restructure. I met his gaze directly. But I don't think that will be necessary. They're stronger together than apart. The Southeast Asia initiative is proving that. They always do, I said with a smile. That's their job. Convincing them otherwise is mine. The next 2 weeks were consumed with launching the Southeast Asia initiative while waiting for Meridian's response to our succession plan. Richard and Emily worked seamlessly together, their complementary skills creating a synergy that impressed even our most skeptical board members. When Victor Sloane announced his resignation as CEO of Concept Living amid growing legal troubles, the industry took notice of Hartwell's contrasting approach to ethical manufacturing. Our stock rose as theirs fell. Artisans from around the world began reaching out, wanting to join our expanding network. The empire I had envisioned was taking shape, stronger and more principled than I had initially imagined, and my children were proving themselves worthy stewards of that vision. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. James Donovan, requesting a meeting not at our offices, but at Meridian's headquarters, with the full investment committee. They want to see all 3 of you, he explained. You, Richard, and Emily. They have questions about the succession plan. The tone of his voice suggested these weren't friendly questions. I agreed to the meeting, but spent the evening preparing my children for what might be a challenging encounter. They'll try to divide us, I warned, to probe for weaknesses in our unified front. Remember, no matter what happens in that room, we are family first, business leaders second. The Meridian Global headquarters occupied 3 floors of a gleaming skyscraper downtown. We were escorted to a conference room where 7 people sat around a massive table, James among them. The atmosphere was deliberately intimidating power projected through architecture and silence. Mrs. Hartwell, Richard, Emily, began Elaine Winters, Meridian's senior partner. Thank you for coming. We've reviewed your proposed succession plan with great interest. And concern, added another partner, Harold Benson. Co-CEO models have a historically poor track record, particularly in family businesses. We've studied those failures, I responded calmly. They typically result from unclear responsibilities, inadequate conflict resolution mechanisms, or insufficient oversight during transition. Our plan addresses all 3 concerns. It raises serious questions about his readiness for leadership. Richard tensed beside me, but maintained his composure. That's a fair concern, he said, surprising the committee. I made a significant error in judgment. I was manipulated by Sloane because I allowed my ambition to cloud my discernment. It's a mistake I won't repeat. Bold statement, Harold said skeptically. But words are easy. What evidence do we have that you've truly learned from this experience? Before Richard could respond, Emily interjected. The Southeast Asia Initiative. Richard was the first to suggest we help the workers affected by Concept Living's practices, prioritizing ethics over opportunity. That's not the action of someone whose judgment remains compromised. The committee members exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this defense from the sibling who had exposed Richard's communications with Sloane. And you, Emily, Elaine pivoted. Your background is in artisan relations and quality control. What qualifies you for overall company leadership? The same thing that qualified my mother 35 years ago, Emily replied without hesitation. A deep understanding of our core product and an unwavering commitment to quality. I've spent the past year expanding that knowledge to include technology integration, financial modeling, and strategic planning. Which brings us to another concern, Harold said. Your role, Eleanor, executive chairwoman with override authority, creates potential for confusion and conflict. Who's really in charge during this transition? I am, I stated firmly. Until I'm not. The timeline is clear, the milestones specific. This isn't about clinging to power, it's about responsible transition. The questioning continued for nearly 2 hours, probing every aspect of our plan, testing our unified front, searching for cracks in our commitment. Through it all, my children demonstrated a maturity and alignment that filled me with quiet pride. Finally, Elaine leaned back in her chair. You've clearly given this considerable thought. We'll need to deliberate and provide our formal response within the week. As we gathered our materials to leave, Harold asked one final question. Eleanor, after all you've built, after proving everyone wrong about your capabilities, are you truly ready to step back? To watch other 7 your children take the reins? The question struck at the heart of what I'd been wrestling with privately. Was I ready? Could I really let go of daily control of the company that had defined my life for 3 decades? I'm ready for the next phase, I answered honestly. Not to disappear, but to evolve. My legacy isn't just what I built, it's what continues after me. I'm ready to help shape that continuation, rather than control it. Harold nodded, seemingly satisfied with the authenticity of my response. Outside Meridian's building, Richard let out a long breath. That was intense. But we held our ground, Emily said. We showed them we're united. Yes, you did, I agreed, feeling a surge of maternal pride that transcended business concerns. Now we wait. The wait was shorter than expected. The following afternoon, James Donovan called with Meridian's decision. Full support for our succession plan, with quarterly reviews during the transition period. The billion-dollar empire I had built would continue under the leadership of both my children, with me guiding the transition from the role of executive chairwoman. That evening, I invited Richard and Emily to my home for dinner, not to discuss business, but to celebrate as a family. As we sat around the table that had witnessed so many family meals, arguments, and reconciliations over the years, I raised my glass in a toast. To Hartwell Designs, I began. The company they thought I was too old to run, that became an empire none of us could have built alone. To Mom, Richard countered, his expression sincere. Who never stopped believing in this company and you, Steven, when we didn't deserve it. To Family, Emily added softly, the foundation beneath everything we've built. As we clinked glasses, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. The journey from being underestimated to vindicated had been challenging and, at times, painful. But the destination, this moment of unity with my children, this knowledge that what I'd built would continue and grow made every struggle worthwhile. 6 months later, we held a press conference to officially announce our succession plan. The business media had been speculating for weeks, with most analysts predicting Richard would be named sole CEO. The announcement of our co-leadership model generated significant interest and some skepticism, but the market responded positively, our stock rising 7% by day's end. The Southeast Asia initiative had exceeded all expectations, with our first Craftsmanship Academy graduating its initial class of artisans, many of them former concept living workers. The program had garnered international attention, with other companies beginning to adopt similar ethical manufacturing models. Victor Sloan had been indicted on multiple charges related to labor violations and financial fraud. Concept Living had been acquired by a larger conglomerate and rebranded, its tainted practices replaced by more ethical approaches, partly in response to the standard Hartwell had established. On the first anniversary of our platform launch, we held a celebration at our headquarters, now expanded to occupy 3 floors of our building. Artisans from around the world joined via video conference. Employees gathered in person. The board attended in full, including Gerald Foster, who winked at me as I approached the podium. 2 years ago, I began surveying the room filled with the people who had helped build our success. Many thought I was too old to lead this company into the future, too set in my ways, too resistant to change. Knowing laughter rippled through the crowd. They weren't entirely wrong, I continued. I was set in certain ways, committed to quality, craftsmanship, and ethical business practices. Those aren't liabilities, they're foundations. What my critics failed to understand is that experience isn't the enemy of innovation, it's the soil in which innovation can take root and flourish. I gestured to Richard and Emily, standing proudly nearby. Today, Hartwell Design stands as proof that wisdom and innovation, experience and fresh perspective, tradition and technology can not only coexist, but create something revolutionary when properly combined. As applause filled the room, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. The company they thought I was too old to run had become a billion-dollar empire under my leadership. More importantly, it had become a force for positive change in an industry long resistant to transformation. And now, as I prepared to gradually transition leadership to my children, I knew that the greatest achievement wasn't the financial success or industry recognition. It was creating something worthy of continuing a legacy built on quality, innovation, and human connection that would outlast me. That evening, after the celebration had ended and the offices emptied, I stood alone by the window of what would soon become Richard and Emily's shared executive suite. The city lights sparkled below, a fitting metaphor for the bright future ahead. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Thank you for showing us the way, Mom. We won't let you down." Moments later, a message from Richard appeared. "The empire you built is just the beginning. We'll make you proud." I smiled, tucking the phone away and taking one last look at the nighttime cityscape. They would make mistakes, face challenges I couldn't anticipate, and forge their own path forward. But they would do so standing on the foundation I had built, not despite my age and experience, but because of it. The woman they had underestimated had created something extraordinary, and this was just the beginning.